So, I formally apologize for claiming that EFAP made the worst Superman review. This half-star review is so bad that reading a paragraph of it feels like the equivalent of Lex Luthor shouting 2X and landing a clean shot. No ma'am, he's a decent family man and citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign's all about. He's not an Arab. John McCain on Obama being labeled as an Arab. There's perhaps no better quote to summarize this film's view on immigration and the role of Middle Eastern people within it. As a Middle Eastern woman who grew up and lives in a Western country, I feel incredibly repulsed by pretty much this entire film and the worldview it validates. So I guess the inclusion of this quote seems to be implying that this movie is enabling anti-immigration, especially for Middle Eastern people. I don't know how Mosquito could possibly come to this conclusion in good faith. One of the most common sentiments I grew up around was the idea that people like me were evil monsters coming to Western nations in order to subjugate and replace the good values of Western countries, while also treating women terribly. It was either full assimilation, or you would always be an outcast, because forbid a Middle Eastern person be proud of who they are, instead of loathing the idea of their own existence. Okay, so let's look up what assimilation means. The absorption and integration of people, ideas, or culture into a wider society or culture.
Write that down, write that down!
Now, the implication here is that the Superman movie pushes the idea that you have to fully assimilate or be an outcast, which is insane because Superman, Supergirl, and Krypto still wear Kryptonian clothing with Kryptonian symbols. They maintain said symbols throughout the fortress, and the fortress itself is a Kryptonian design that they've chosen to keep. If Superman really wanted to ditch everything Kryptonian, don't you think he'd go for a redesign that abandons any traces of Kryptonian roots? You know, like an American-themed suit like Homelander's? I also want to draw attention to this moment, which takes place after Clark learned the truth about his Kryptonian parents.
Your obsession with me is getting a little creepy.
Don't worry. Tall, dark, and Martian isn't my type.
Kryptonian.
Yeah, same diff.
Excuse me?
Gunn, being the white liberal idiot that he is, crafts a film that validates the exact fears that those same racist Westerners have always held against Middle Eastern people like myself. Superman's parents do send him to Earth with the pure intention of subjugating the world under his rule and shoving women into Kryptonian harems. Harems, of course, being used as a trope in racist Orientalist literature.
Fun drinking game. Take a shot every time she mentions she's either a female or Middle Eastern in every single one of her reviews. Your liver will thank you.
It's really funny how Lex Luthor has this entire agenda where he pushes xenophobic propaganda regarding Superman to make the public afraid of him. He bases his claims about who Superman is around what his parents have said in the message, but none of Superman's actions. This is only putting blame on Superman by association due to his bloodline, which is a xenophobic line of reasoning. So, you see the movie clearly portray this as a bad mindset that the evil American billionaire is using, and your response to this is to say that this is proof that James Gunn is promoting the same fear-mongering used against Middle Eastern people?
Yes.
You are not a serious person.
Will you shut the hell up?
Yeah guys, apparently James Gunn validated racist and xenophobic ideology by writing Lex Luthor of all people to represent racist and xenophobic ideology. This is insane. And of course, the film will peddle you with the idea that Superman is inherently good because of his choices, but when we think for more than 2 minutes, the implications are obvious. People are not born in this world with inherent beliefs. People are a product of the environments and material conditions they grew up with, and this film believes that Superman is good because of his good parentage. Anyone can see that his parents are draped in this aesthetic of rural Americana, and then it becomes obvious that the message is being pushed here is that Superman's Americanness makes him good as opposed to the monstrous society he came from. The statement of one of his robots asking if he wants to see his parents at the film's close, where we are greeted to imagery of his American upbringing, now replacing the corrupt and evil heritage of Krypton, makes it even more clear. Why are you so fixated on Clark's parents being American? The film doesn't say they're good just because they're Americans and therefore you can only be good by being an American or fully assimilating into American culture. The reason his parents are good influences on Clark is because they're simply good people. That is such a simple answer when you're not overthinking for silly political talking points. The story doesn't even state that it's Clark's parents that made him good. They're a good influence on him, but it's still Clark's choice on what he decides to listen to.
Parents aren't for telling their children who they're supposed to be. We are here to give y'all tools, help you make fools of yourselves all on your own.
Sup? Kairato here.
I'm going to add a bit to this discussion, mainly because this is a particular part of Superman discourse that I found myself oddly passionate about and constantly debating with people online. The quote-unquote tools PodCam refers to here are pieces of advice. By definition, advice is a recommendation regarding a decision or course of conduct, and parents are merely there to present such advice to their child. The individual receiving this information must ultimately decide how to interpret it, assuming they choose to utilize it at all. This is illustrated earlier in the scene with Pa Kent. What's wrong with conveying that immigrants have agency and shouldn't let the xenophobic things people say define them? How do you and all the other people who somehow agree with you come out of this movie thinking that it has something against immigrants or parents of immigrants? Are we really being this bad faith? I think it's really ironic that you present yourself as this activist and beacon of morality when you outright assume that a whole society and culture is quote-unquote monstrous because of two people. Anyways, I simply wanted to add my 2 cents on my thoughts regarding not just this specific review, but a general sentiment I've seen regarding this film's depiction of his biological parents. I have a YouTube channel with not a whole lot, but I plan to post more, and hopefully post videos of higher quality.
But it doesn't stop there. This film's vile nature extends to its incredibly exploitive treatment of Jarhanpur. White American liberals have propped up this film as a bastion of pro-Palestinian resistance when in reality, the film exploits imagery associated with the horrific genocide of Palestinians for a message that ultimately props up American saviorism. I'd like to mention that James Gunn himself stated that he didn't intend on this area of the film being an allegory, and that it ultimately comes off as mostly in the film as a take on Russia/Ukraine. But I do believe that regardless, he seems to have taken a lot of imagery exploiting the Palestinian genocide. Superman doesn't represent America. He literally says this in the movie. Did you watch it?
I wasn't representing anybody except for me
around the
and,
world.
and
More
myself
than a war that lasted between
good,
12
I don't know,
and 24
doing
hours.
good.
Not to mention that Lex refers to Baravia as their allies, so the American government doesn't want retaliation amongst Baravia, especially since Baravia has claimed to be freeing the Jarhanpurians from a tyrannical regime. The American government is enabling that narrative instead of showing clear skepticism. While Superman flat out doesn't buy that, how is this representative of American saviorism? I also don't know how this movie is exploiting imagery from the Palestinian genocide when James Gunn was never using that imagery as a basis for it. A lot of people weren't even aware of it until October 2023, where it started to gain more coverage and the script was finished by then. How was he exploiting something that didn't cross his mind in the production? Take the moment in which hundreds of helpless Jarhanpurians are depicted lifting up Superman's insignia and chanting for him to save them, maybe one of them holding a gun. They are portrayed as helpless bodies without any agency or character, but apparently this is progressive? What is progressive or empowering about the heinous evolution of white saviorist tropes? How is it empowering for Palestinians butchered by Israel to have a film where their struggle is exploited in order to push a message where corporate-backed American superheroes inevitably save them? What is empowering about seeing a bunch of people like you who are voiceless? Where is it implied that the Jarhanpurians lack agency? Luthor had to supply Baravia with weapons to begin with to enable the conflict. Why would Luthor need to do that if they lacked agency? The Jarhanpurians are also the ones who inspire the Justice Gang to take action and spread the word on TV. Calling for help because they need it doesn't mean they lack agency, and in order for the conflict of the story to work, they need to be in some kind of peril that they can't defend themselves from. And genuinely, shut up about the white savior point. It's so cringe and grifter-esque every time I hear this when people are forcing political brain rot in movie discussion.
Look, I'm just not interested in getting involved in politics, okay? Sorry.
It's insane how you mentioned that American corporate-backed superheroes inevitably save them, when they're literally going against protocol when doing this. They make a specific point about how they don't get involved in political conflict, unlike Superman. So if anything, this doesn't represent the American government's agenda. And I have to ask, what is the solution for this movie? Should the Jarhanpurians single-handedly take on the Baravian military that's being funded and supplied by a billionaire? Why is it so bad that superheroes simply choose to help people no matter where they're from? If anything, it's a bad message to say that they shouldn't save people from genocide. This shouldn't be a surprise, of course, to anyone who knows about the American war criminal Tom King's involvement on this film, but nevertheless, you hear people continuing to claim this work of fantasy as legitimate agitprop. Hell, the film doesn't even dislike the American government. They are shown repeatedly trying to make sure Luthor isn't going too far, and end up arresting him the minute he is exposed as the monster that he is. American flags drape the aftermath of the battle, cops and soldiers move in synchrony, helping out victims of the single bad egg Lex Luthor, as America's mythos is once again more validated. Are you serious right now?
Fucking shit! Cut! Cut! Cut!
The government is blatantly corrupt and immoral in this movie. Nobody stands up for Superman by saying he's still a sentient being that should have basic rights. They literally give Lex Luthor the authority to kill him after the interrogation is done. What do you mean the film doesn't show a dislike to the American government? Not to mention Rick Flag Sr. is complicit in the Suicide Squad's operations. And arresting Lex Luthor doesn't mean the government is being portrayed well. They're arresting Luthor because there's too much evidence against him, and the optics wouldn't be in their favor if they were to let him off.
But the optics? Superman is popular.
Conservatives and liberals can finally agree on is that Lex Luthor sucks.
Not to mention that ignoring the optics of the situation, Lex Luthor put a black hole under the entire fucking city. Of course they're going to arrest him for self-preservation reasons. And you might ask if there was at least perhaps something else about this piece that worked. Maybe there was some nice lighting, or some breathtaking shot compositions, maybe a great performance or compelling moment within the story. But no, this film is virtually devoid of anything resembling humanity. Gunn portrays this world with the eyes of a studio executive. Everything is either washed out or ridiculously overlit. There are moments in this film that look straight out of a car commercial. The Mr. Terrific fight sequence in particular feels like Gunn has reached a point of self-parody where he's simply trying to imitate his past works without a moment of actual heart. Okay, so what moments look like a car commercial? I love when people make claims like this, then point to no scenes or even qualify in detail what car commercial means. And even if it does, there's usually justifiable context as to why it looks the way that it does. Some shots will simply look more standard compared to others because they're not trying to achieve as much or capture as complicated of a sequence. Like when that movie you like so much basically turns into a clothing commercial. I don't know how the Mr. Terrific fight is just an imitation of the past. He might be inspired by his older works, but that's not the same as imitating past works. That just shows he has a consistent style. And given that you like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, I think you'd realize that this is a good thing. The film's treatment of women also leaves a lot to be desired, with Eve's character falling into so many misogynistic storytelling tropes. People will parade Gunn as an example of a man who understands and views us as people, but throughout the vast majority of his career, he's often relegated us to objectified bodies or love interests with very little agency on our own. Even Lois in this film has an arc that pretty much solely centers around validating and helping a man, while Superman himself gets to have an incredibly bad, yet prevalent arc regarding his own concept of self. So apparently it's misogynistic when a supporting character in the movie is supporting the main character. Welcome to the 1/10th intelligence. I don't see how Eve's character falls into misogynistic tropes, but then again, this is the same reality where Iron Man is supposed to let children die, so elaborate reasoning isn't a thing here. I don't see how Eve lacks agency when it's her agency that allows Lex to be exposed. She gets treated as an object by Luthor, but she overcomes that and exposes him in the end. How does Lois lack agency on her own? She's the one who does the interview with Clark and challenges him on her own. Did you watch the movie? She also helps break the story of Luthor's collusion with Baravia. This also proves that she doesn't just validate Clark. Her arc is tied to Clark, but that's because they have a close connection to each other, so that only makes sense. This is like calling Raimi's Spider-Man misogynistic because MJ's development is achieved through Peter's help in the first movie, and her arc in the second movie is pushed by Peter's decisions, as well as in the third movie. But I guess that's not misogynistic or removing of agency because these are movies you like. I feel this film in general speaks to a larger issue I have with a lot of Western film enthusiasts, notably the idea that they will prop up anything if it is even slightly provocative in their eyes. This is coming from the person who gave Spider-Man 3 a 5-star review. Westerners are desperate to feel that they are doing some good in the world, even if it's the most token bullshit that propagates the same harmful beliefs that led to so many of the same societal constraints that people think they are helping suffer from. Watching James Gunn's Superman doesn't make you holier than thou, it just makes you another consumer. Okay, and grandstanding about James Gunn's Superman doesn't make you holier than thou, it just makes you a performative nutcase.
This first part of the grieving process, brothers. Now let's all hold hands, huh?
This review is not just inaccurate and filled with bad faith criticism, but it also goes out of its way to insult fans and creators. Your ability to make arguments is not much better than people like The Critical Drinker. The only difference is the side you're leaning on. I can't believe something this insane somehow got 68 likes, not to mention these insane tags that you can read for yourself. This was painful to read. I might need a good long break from breaking down Letterboxd reviews after this. And the thing is, we haven't even reached the final boss of Superman criticism. That is all for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you want more of these videos, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.